Welcome, everyone, and good morning. I'm Lori Zimmerman, the Director of Professional Learning with MASA, and we are really excited to have with us two of our business partners today talking about team dynamics and leadership development, kind of ways to keep people engaged and retention, as we know, can also be a challenge right now in this time of staffing. So we want to work hard to keep the really good people that we have. Speaking of really good people, we have Teri and Julie here to talk with us today. So Teri, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the session and your cohort.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. It's sure fun to see some friends on the Zoom. Thanks for joining us all this morning. We're delighted to be here. As you know, we're going to be talking a little bit about team dynamics and leadership development, and really excited for you to be here. I'm Teri Staloch. I'm a former teacher, principal, director, assistant superintendent, and currently working with Partner Ed, supporting a lot of different districts in strategic planning and in connecting them and helping them with some team dynamics. So I'm also a coordinator for the administrative licensure at the University of Minnesota and enjoying that as well. And I will let my colleague introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Critz. I'm also a retired superintendent, most recently from Alexandria. Prior to that, I was an educator in elementary teacher. I've been a principal in the elementary and the high school levels, also teaching and learning. And I recently did a interim superintendency in a small school district in Western Minnesota, Clinton, Graceville, Beardsley. So since then, I've been working with Partner Ed as well, supporting school districts and leaders really across the state and somewhat across the nation. We're fortunate to be supporting schools in other states as well. So we're excited to be here today with you, talking about leadership and dynamic leadership.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Lori, I'm not seeing it on my screen, but are they? Oh, there we go. Thank you. And you can go ahead to slide 3, I think, whip through those first two. Thanks so much. So just thinking a little bit, we know that your time is precious, so we planned a session that will help provide you some research, some insights, some strategies as you reflect on how much your leadership matters. We'll focus on the importance of leaders being mindful and intentional in that building the leadership capacity of their teams. We know leaders all know how important this is, but we've also found that when we're under pressure, and we're trying to meet the demands of the day and the pace is crazy, we focus on those tasks in front of us and we set aside the need for the foundation of leadership development. And we know that those intentional strategies need to be provided for our teams. So regardless of the makeup or the purpose of your group, it's important that your team understands clarity, culture, and competence as they work on behalf of students in the community. We'll share some research about those factors and then a team dynamics tool that we've used with multiple teams called Squadify that we use when we coach and work with teams. So we know leading in the public arena provides many opportunities for challenges, and it provides educational leaders many opportunities for great impact and great joy as we provide equitable opportunities and help shape what the future looks like for our students, our families, our staff, and our communities. Understanding the comprehensive and complex nature of serving children in their communities, we're most effective, and it's a whole lot more fun when we develop and nurture strong teams to help coordinate action on behalf of our students. We want to share just a brief video with you. You've maybe seen this, but we think it's always a good reminder, just talking about the importance of teams, service, and being there for one.
The Navy SEALs are one of the highest performing organizations on the planet, and a former Navy SEAL was asked, who makes it through BUD/S? Who makes it through the selection process to become a SEAL? And he said, I can't tell you who gets through, who makes it, but I can tell you the kind of people who don't make it. He said the star college athletes that never have been really tested to the core of their being, none of them make it through. He said the preening leaders who like to delegate everything, none of them make it through. He said the big tough guys that come in with huge muscles, covered in tattoos, who want to prove to everyone how tough they are, none of them make it through. He said some of the guys that make it through are skinny and scrawny. He said some of the guys who make it through, you will see them shivering out of fear. He said, but every single one of them who makes it through, when they're emotionally exhausted, when they're physically exhausted, some way, somehow, they're able to dig down deep inside themselves to find the energy to help the person next to them. Service. Service. Giving to another, having their back, is what makes the highest performing teams in the world. Not their strength and not their intelligence. It's their willingness to be there for each other.
Thanks, Lori. So if we,
The Navy SEALs are one of the highest
they're still the highest performing group, those Navy SEAls. Thanks so much. So, right, we all know people like that, people dedicated to serving others and to digging in to help the person next to them. We know such leaders, we are such leaders, and we want a team around us dedicated like that of such leaders. However, in order to develop such teams, it's also important to think about what that means and how to do it. So there aren't a lot of us on the screen. There's only 15 or so on the screen. So we're going to give you a couple options here. When you look at that question, why don't we first put them in the chat, but then we'll see if there's a few of you that just want to share some of your ideas. So what are you intentionally doing right now to prioritize the development, engagement, and support of your leadership team? So if you just want to throw some ideas in the chat, and we'll just share those out and get your voices into the space. And you're more than welcome to come off mute and also share things. So it looks like Lori just shared, we're developing a local leadership group to provide growth training at all levels of staff and departments. That's awesome. Daniel, goal setting, regular communication, listening and promoting thought, challenging to do better. That's awesome. And that all takes some time, right? That listening piece. Stand-up meetings, Jamie, more often to check in and support each other. That's awesome. Tyrone, purposeful agendas with roles and summaries, data-driven decisions. These are all great strategies. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Julie.
I'm just going to follow up on Jamie's comment about the stand-up meetings. You know, sometimes those informal, impromptu meetings are as important as the intentionally planned ones with long agendas, and but those informal ones allow for the real conversations to happen versus the ones that we think need to happen are more agenda driven. So that's wonderful. Yeah, Deb's doing some.
Great, listening to each other, Deb, and asking how we can support each other and providing that support. Yeah, you know, that really is around that notion of trust. How do we engage in trusting relationships with our team? So we're at the place where we can say, hey, I really do need help on this. I'm not sure what to do next, and we can be vulnerable with teammates. So thank you so much for sharing your ideas and coming into the conversation a bit. And please interrupt us at any time. Wade, those performance goals, rounding on goals, weekly big rock meetings. Wade, do you mind just sharing us a bit about that? That's intriguing to me.
Weekly we meet with our administrative team, and the big rocks are what are the big things that are in alignment with our performance goals that we're working on, focusing on over the next 2 weeks. And we're able to put those out there, and then it's, as a team, how can we assist you and help you solve some of the problems, go through the discerning process. How can we help you? And then hold you accountable to the work that you've committed to over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. Well, thank you all for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and let Julie take us forward.
All right. So whether we think intentionally about leadership or not, we definitely have leaders across our organization. And today we're not just talking about superintendents, but really the leaders that you have across your buildings, in departments, teacher leaders, perhaps in coaching roles, equity leaders. When you look at what you have available to you in your organization, you have many, many leaders, and they have a pretty significant impact across the organization on your employees, on the culture, and really within the community as well. So paying attention to the leadership and the skill set that they have is sometimes underestimated, I think, by the top leader in the organization, or potentially underestimated. So the stat here from Gallup that we have been doing a lot of work around is this one that says the manager or team leader alone accounts for 70% of the variance in team engagement. And so when you start to look at employee engagement and people who choose to stay, who love their job, who choose to leave or leave the profession, many times that comes back to the leadership in the organization as to how they felt about their work and if they felt supported or wanted to stay. So we realize that unintentional or accidental leadership is really kind of a dangerous thing, and we really have to find ways to pay attention to the development of our leaders. Lori, would you advance, please? All right, so when you look at this quadrant, on the left axis there, we have clarity, and along the bottom is intentionality. And you see what happens when we have low clarity and low intentionality in terms of developing your leadership. You really have no leadership. Things just happen in a non-intentional manner. People might be doing what they want. You have lots of siloed work within your building. And if you're intentional but without clarity, you see that leadership is more vague. So we're striving toward that intentional leadership quadrant, where you need to be intentional about development, about process, about skills and attributes of your leaders. And also we need to be really clear about what it is that you expect them to do. They need to be clear about what they want their employees to do. And when those two align, intentionality and clarity, we get up into that fourth quadrant with intentional leadership, which is what we desire in all of our organizations, and what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. This slide, although it says healthcare at the top, and I fully know that it says healthcare, I asked for permission to use this slide because right next to the healthcare data is K-12 education, if you see that. I sit on a board, and the CEO of that board, they belong to Gallup, and so they get a lot of research and additional resources from Gallup, but I just asked if we could borrow his slide. So when we are looking at, let's take a look at the K-12 education information in the middle of the slide. So the green color at the top is the percentage of employees that are engaged in the work of education. So 32% of our employees after the pandemic report that they are engaged. That middle gray section is the percentage of employees who are not engaged in their work. And the 13% at the bottom in the black are actively disengaged. So let's just talk for a minute about what's the difference. The engaged part, the 32% who are engaged, those tend to be the people in your school district that are leading initiatives, who step up with a positive attitude, who view change as a good thing and an opportunity to be better. They're those that you go to when you need something. They're likely very positive. They're going the extra mile. They're staying late. If you have a committee and you're looking for volunteers, they're that person with their hand in the air that says, I'll do it. In the middle, the 55% in the middle is the not engaged. And that group of people, the definition of the not engaged part is that they're doing their work. They're coming to work on time. They're leaving on time. They're delivering instruction or whatever it is that they're asked to do. They're doing their job with them at the minimum expectations. So if you've told them to do something, they do it and they go home. They're not likely volunteering for other things. They're not necessarily working against the district, but they're not super excited and speaking positively. So that group that's in the green, your engaged group, they're talking positively about your organization, about the work that you're trying to do. That green or the gray section, that 55% that are not engaged, they're probably not talking about their work very much at all. Maybe doing a little bit of grumbling. Sometimes they might have some positive comments, but for the most part, you can consider them relatively neutral. And then the 13% at the bottom that are actively disengaged, they are the people that likely are resisting change. They're absolutely not volunteering. Oftentimes they are not speaking positively about the district or the district's initiatives. They're tending to be a little bit more critical and undermining the work and the change of the school district. So we certainly want to pay attention to the number of people who are engaged, but ideally we want to shift some of that middle gray group, the not engaged, into your engaged group again. And so some of the things we're talking about here hopefully will help your leadership teams to grow the leaders in a way that helps them engage their employees differently. Thank you, Lori. So here's some of the research that we've been reading about. This is from the Harvard Business Review. So the 3 conditions for success that they've talked about are they're emphasizing are sharing a compelling direction, being really clear about the direction of your organization, what you're trying to accomplish, what you expect people to do, and not only knowing the compelling direction, but communicating that to across your organization. Strong structures, processes, and supportive context. So those are the 3 things, conditions essentially that HBR is really emphasizing. So what does supportive context mean? It's defining for your leaders and for others in the organization, helping them to understand more about your organization, what you mean, what's your mission, vision, and values, and then defining the context around the work that they need to do. An interesting piece here that I don't think that's surprising, that's right in the middle of the slide around the corrosive problems, the 2 corrosive problems that are surfacing in a greater way than they have previously. One is the us versus them thinking, and the other one is incomplete information. And so we see in the political climate and around the United States, the us versus them thinking, but it's happening in schools too, where our employees don't always feel like we're on the same team. They feel like, some people believe one thing, someone else believes another. Sometimes it's administration versus teachers. It may be school board. They feel, they say, they do, and we want or we feel. So that non-collaborative or the thinking that makes sure we're all on the same team. We have our arrows pointing the same direction. We're all rowing the boat the same direction. Those are those things that we need to work at. And then the incomplete information, people jump quickly to conclusions, and frequently they have a piece of information, but not all of the information. And while we know that about the world, think about the impact of that with your leaders and the folks within your organization. If they have incomplete information and they're making decisions or they're sharing information, let's say it's a principal, they have incomplete information and they're taking a stance on something with their staff, you can see where it undermines trust. So we want to make sure that people are not taking social media, one media source, some of those places where we're getting information and claiming that to be the all truth instead of seeking additional information. And then HBR is telling us that the 2 new conditions for success that they've added to the original 3 that are listed at the top. One is promoting the shared mindset versus that I can do this, I'm the leader, I'll tell you what to do. It's that idea of we need each other, and that's back to the Simon Sinek video about this is really about a team. We have to work together, we need to support each other, And we can't just think that we can do this on our own. We will succeed with a shared mindset. And the last is around assessments to determine effectiveness, which is part of what we're going to talk with you about today as a tool for that. It's really hard to know how successful your leadership team is. We all have a perception of how we function as leaders. We have a perception, we think, of how maybe our cabinet or your executive leadership team. So we certainly have personal perceptions on how effective we are, but how do we really know? And so part of the HBR research around that is that we really need to determine your effectiveness through some form of an assessment. And many of you have those assessments in place. We'll share another tool around assessment shortly here. Lori, thank you. So another piece of the HBR research is 5 things that high performing teams do differently. They have genuine, authentic leaders. And part of that is development. Part of that is innate. And part of that is the conversations that you're having with your folks to make sure that they genuinely care. It's not a fake it necessarily, or fake it till you make it, but it's genuine people who care and want to lead their organizations. They have deep relationships across the team and across the organization, even with those that they're leading. There's some autonomy to make decisions and be trusted to do the right thing, and to carry out an action plan or carry out the work, and yet they belong to a team. So they need to feel that sense of belonging. They know that the best work will happen because they're a part of a team, but they have autonomy to carry it out. And that last piece is around competency and the importance of having competent, well-trained, skilled leaders. Those are those 5 things that all high-performing teams tend to demonstrate. There's another piece of research, and the reason that we're sharing from the Harvard Business Review, here's Lencioni's work. You'll see some common threads. Likely some of you have done some of this, some leadership training in your own organization. And so you start to see some common themes. With Lencioni, he's got his 4 disciplines to creating the right environment, but you start to see some similar words. You see cohesive, you see clarity, communicate, again, clarity on Lencioni's 4 disciplines. And on the other side, the harmful behaviors. And we talk about the 2 that the Harvard Business Review highlighted. They kind of go in line. Harmful behaviors is absence of trust. And think about all the ways that we violate and erode trust with our actions, our words, our lack of action sometimes, the fear of conflict. And that too is prevalent. And in some ways it's real as our political environment is more and more volatile, and you're trying to navigate a community of lots of political viewpoints. There sometimes is a fear of conflict, which may be paralyzing and keep you from doing the right thing. Lack of commitment to the cause or the profession, avoidance of accountability. And so some of the work we've been doing with leadership teams, we are finding that here's an example, that avoidance of accountability at times happens at more of the building or the department level. And part of that is because they do have strong relationships, and it's really hard to hold people accountable or have those hard conversations when it's a friend or somebody that you care about. And the last harmful one is inattention to results. So when we know things aren't working and we see that we're not getting the results that are desired, we need to do something about that. So we need to be accountable. We need to commit to that. We can't be afraid of the conflict. They all kind of run together. So, Lori.
Thanks, Julie. So based on all of, excuse me, that research, we know that organizations are looking for ways to increase their performance, and especially during this time of staffing concerns, figuring out how do we retain really great staff? How do we attract really great staff? So there was a recent analysis of data that was collected over the last 3 years, over 30,000 participants. And it said that many leaders and teams, there's one factor, there's one success indicator that they're missing, and that it would help. So what do you think that is? You could just go ahead and go off mute and just throw out a word or two. What do you think they found that leaders and teams are neglecting or not doing? Any ideas? Or you can put it in the chat if you'd rather. The freedom to be frank, productive disagreement, great ideas. Let's see. Let's go ahead, Lori, with the next authentic praise. Like that. So the answer, according to this survey at least, is actually, one more slide, please, is around clarity and making sure that leaders and teams are just really, really clear on where they are and what they're doing and all of those kinds of notions. So as we've worked with teams, Lori, if you want to go one more, the 3 conditions of success that we have been working through and continue to learn about. Clarity is certainly one of those. And when we think about organizational clarity, we really think about the degree to which employees understand the organization's mission, vision, values, strategic plans, strategic goals, priorities, as well as their own responsibilities toward achieving those. What are their roles? Do they have a voice in all of that? Are they really clear with all of those types of things? In terms of organizational climate, that refers to both those systems and structures that are in place, as well as the actual culture of the organization. Culture really is about those shared beliefs, values, norms that influence employee behavior and influence people staying or going. It's kind of the way things have always been or are being done in an organization. Organization and culture sometimes is considered to be described as really that deep-rooted and difficult to change because it's embedded in the organization's history, traditions, and leadership. And that's where, when you come into an organization and it's not the culture that you want, it takes some work and intentionality around processes. Some of you have already talked about the importance of those check-ins and connections and support to one another. And then finally, when we think about the organizational competence, it's really about those contributions, the motivation, the mindset of the individuals in each team. Helps teams determine where the needed skills are, what the knowledge is for their roles, as well as the will and the mindset to strive for excellence, to know that team interest must be over individual interest, and the importance of listening to each other and providing coaching to each other and support to each other. So that clarity was the big piece, but really clarity, climate, and competence are going to be what we talk about for the next several minutes.
So we'd like to introduce a tool for you to consider. It's called Squadify, and it's a assessment tool for highly effective teams. And whether you're using Squadify or not, the contents of Squadify, the key skills that are measured and assessed, are found to be through research, those that highly effective teams should pay attention to. So we're sharing this in the context of Squadify, but know that those skills or attributes are things that you can focus on, whether you're measuring them through Squadify or not. Okay. A team would take a Squadify assessment. It's 40 questions, and those questions, the team answers the same question 2 times. The first time they answer a question, it's regarding the importance of a skill or attribute, and there are many questions that will support competence, many questions that support climate, and so forth. So the first time they answer the question, they'll say they'll share how important they think it is within a team or within your team, whatever team you're assessing. Well, I'm going to use as an example your cabinet. If you're doing this with your cabinet members would answer that first question about how important they think it is. And later they answer a similar question that says how present on your team or within your team is this skill or attribute. And later we're going to look at the gap, the difference between how important they thought it was and how present it is on the team. So once they've taken an assessment like that, this would be the first page of their report. It gives overall insights into the effectiveness of the team that took this assessment. So in this case, it's a cabinet. Their strongest condition of success is competence, and their weakest was climate. You see on the other side, there's additional attributes that are measured, and this one, they're called team dynamics. Their strongest dynamic is motivation, and their weakest dynamic is trust. So as a leader, we can look, and here's where we want to be careful to not make decisions or make assumptions around what we're seeing without digging a little bit deeper into the why. You see that there's some additional information around the squad strengths that are listed there and the squad challenges that came from the surveys. So this information, this report is generated based on your employees or your leadership team's responses. Lori? Going further, then now we're going to get a little bit deeper. So now you see the 3 C's, the 3 conditions for success: clarity, climate, and competence. And each one of these is set up the same way. The inner gray circle, the dark inner gray circle, is what your team scored in terms of importance, how important they felt it was, that particular condition for success. And the next dark circle, the thicker one, purple in the clarity circle, shows the presence. So you can see in the clarity one, you have 3.6 for presence and a 4.4 for importance. The thin line around the outside shows Squadify averages, and Squadify is a tool that's used really around the world. It's recently moved into the United States. It was founded in New Zealand, and so it's just starting to be present in the United States, and Partner Ed is the provider for education for it, but it's been used widely in businesses around the world. So when you're looking at the Squadify average, know that that's not just education. These are businesses around the world who are using this tool. And again, you look across here and you can see the comparison of how important is it and how present is it in your squad. So if this was your report, this would be a starting place, and then there's additional details for each of those areas. Lori? All right, so these are the additional details if you were to dig in for clarity in this particular, for this particular team. Again, you see the gray bar is importance and the purple bar is presence. And I won't read through those, but if we were having a conversation with this team, we'd start to talk about what are the gaps and why do we think they are what they are. The process that we use for this is first to talk with the leader, the superintendent, or whoever the leader of the team is, and then eventually to facilitate a discussion and process with the entire team. Lori? The dynamics that I referred to earlier, the 6 dynamics of high-performing teams, are listed here. Again, they align also with the 3 C's. So when you're asking a question that relates to psychological safety, that question is likely one that is contributing to the score on climate as well. And sometimes a question in any one of the dynamic categories relates to multiple of the areas in the 3 C's. But without reading each of these, you can see that trust and psychological safety on the right-hand side often go hand in hand. It's really interesting to see how organizations view each other, the people within the team. And remembering that this isn't a measurement of the superintendent. This tool is a measurement of the effectiveness of the team, how they're operating and how they view each other. So it's a always interesting discussion. Lori, would you move one more slide, please? The circles work the same way with the team dynamics, so I won't re-explain that, but on a report, we would be able to click for details and get additional detail around each one of the team dynamics that are listed there. Go ahead, Lori. This report is one that's often very useful and where we spend a considerable amount of time when we're doing the facilitation. So the colors matter. Purple is always clarity. The gold bar is always culture, and pink is always competence. So when you're looking at the colors, you're going to tie that back to your 3 C's. But I'm going to call out on the right-hand side under lows, enough resources to get the job done. So this score is low, and at first blush, most of the time we think of money and that we don't have enough money to get the job done. It becomes a financial thing. And every time we've dug into this with a team, we have found out that it's not money, that it's frequently something else. One of the more recent teams that we talked about this with, at the end of the day, it came down to not only about time, because the superintendent said, oh no, this isn't a time issue. We meet every week. We meet for several hours every week. You have time. But what finally was shared by one of the members of the cabinet, they said, it's true, but our agendas are full. And so from the time we start to the time our meetings end, we are on task, moving through the agenda. And so I'm solving some of those problems myself, or I'm pulling other people into my office and figuring it out outside of our cabinet. So the people that needed to know about it weren't necessarily there, and they just felt this urgency to get it done. So the resource that they needed to get the job done was time for authentic conversations about what's really going on versus a task agenda of other meaningful things. And I think that's a common thing across any organization. There's so much to get done. You come to a meeting, you have an agenda, you get started, you hammer it out, boom, boom, boom. You try to talk about it. You're hoping for authentic conversations, but sometimes there's not room for space, just for like, okay, let's talk for a minute. What else is going on in your world that you need more time with? So sometimes resources ends up being about time. Sometimes it's about processes. Sometimes it is about money, but it might be, surprisingly, it's been really, really rare that money or finances, budget was the real issue. Usually it turns out to be something else. And it's the conversations that help us to get to that. Another one around resolving tensions quickly, straight talk without offense. Those scores aren't always very high. And we realize that people are being kind in the meetings and not saying what they really think, or sometimes it's a fear of saying what they really think. So, when you start to look at scores like this, and if you're going to be a leader that does something like this, you have to let yourself be vulnerable. You can't take it, you can't be defensive, you can't take it personally, and you have to be willing to grow. Because when you see some of those things, are you going to feel bad and be hurt? Or are you going to say, I didn't realize, or we need to work on this, and here's how we're going to do it? If you're willing to embrace growth and change with your team, this is a great way to do that. Lori? This team, and any team that takes this multiple times, we can generate a report that shows comparison. So this particular team had done three Squadify assessments, and you can see that their highs were in November when they took it, the high was up 1%. That was exciting. In a minute, I'm going to show you what happened in the middle. Going across their lows, the lowest scores were also up 19%. So that was a good thing too. The gap between what they thought was important and what was present in their team was reduced by 26%. And the range of scores, where someone might score at a 5 and someone else scores at a 2, you start to wonder why that is. If most people in the team think it's a 4 or a 5, and someone on the team thinks it's a 1 or a 2, those are things to pay attention to as well. You wonder if that person is feeling isolated, if they're undervalued, if they feel they're not heard. So you really want to pay attention to the range as well. And this particular team was effective and becoming more effective from June to November. Lori, let's look at the next slide that shows what happened to them in the middle. All right, so this team, this one took their first assessment in March. They were doing well. They were working on leadership skills, but you see what happened to them in June. And you might wonder why. If we took time right now to pause, we could probably make some suppositions about what we think happened in June. But think about what happens in schools between March and June. Hiring, changing of staff, planning for the next year, budget reductions, end of the school year, so some stressful kinds of things. And in this particular school district, they had a situation that happened with some of the members of their cabinet that really eroded trust. And it blew up in a fairly big way. Some folks felt very compromised and unsupported, and they didn't like how things had played out across the district. And you see what happened to their team effectiveness. It went down in the only thing that stayed the same or up slightly was clarity. They were still very clear about what they were being tasked to do. They were clear about their role. They knew what the direction of the district was. That the clarity didn't change, but the climate and the competence and how that was viewed with employee to employee or team member to team member eroded quickly in just that few months. And so when we did the June Squadify and they realized, wow, the leader of this team realized how much damage had been done just in that short period of time through one action that had happened. Then they needed to rebuild their team and start to work on that. And you see that they regained quite a bit, but they're not all the way. They're not back to where they were in March in climate competence or their overall score. So like I said, it really matters when you start to watch your team and measure the effectiveness of your team over time. Lori? Teri, how are we doing here?
I think we're doing okay. It's about 3 minutes, and it's always fun to hear the accents. So maybe go ahead and share the video and just learn a little bit more from the founders. You okay with that, Julie?
Yeah, that sounds great. And there we go. Lori's got it here.
So this is a video that'll just give you a little more context and about the folks that we work with.
There has never been a more important time to get your teams working to their full potential. We don't need to tell you this, but work environments have become increasingly complex. And in such challenging conditions, it's only teams that can harness diversity to solve problems and then execute rapidly to deliver results. But did you know that 6 out of 10 teams are dysfunctional? This number becomes even more pronounced when it comes to those essential cross-functional teams. Teams need continuous data on their teamwork and targeted support to deliver business results consistently. Squadify is a SaaS platform and services solution specifically designed for businesses to unleash the potential of their teams. Think of it a little bit like a fitness program for your team. Get the metrics, identify the areas that require improvement, and do the specific exercises that will help it to improve and keep improving. Teams using Squadify consistently follow a simple cycle: data, dialogue, development. First, the teams regularly assess their own team dynamics using Squadify to give them the data that they need. The Squadify report then gives the team insights and suggestions for improvement. Then the team discuss the data together and identify 1 or 2 things to work on that will have the most impact. And finally, they choose from a range of resources to accelerate and develop the team. Coach on demand. a team performance coach by your side to help you along the way. Squadify Connects, mini audio modules to build the skills and behaviours to become a winning team. Team Accelerators, proven modules that solve the biggest problems that teams have. Squadify is backed by the latest research on teams and built around the proven pillars of team success: clarity, climate and competence, which have been validated not only by academic institutions but by 25 years of practice. Because Squadify uses data to laser target team development, you rapidly see improvements in alignment, engagement, trust, and as a result, performance. And you can track your team's progress regularly over time. Don't just take our word for it. Some of the world's best organizations trust Squadify to elevate the performance of their teams. So get started with Squadify, a refreshingly simple, data-driven approach to accelerating teams in a complex workplace. To learn how Squadify can help you, book a discovery call now.
Thank you, Lori. We're your discovery call. So we're sharing information with you today. With us this morning, we have Superintendent Jeff Drake from Fergus Falls. And Jeff has been using Squadify, the Squadify tool, with his school district and his leadership team for some time, since this last summer. Teri and I, and we have others within Partner Ed who became certified Squadify coaches, or Squadify professionals we're called. And Jeff was so gracious that he agreed to work with me. I needed to find a school district to get started with and to help me get my certification, which Jeff was so kind to do that with his team. But now that his team has taken multiple Squadifys, we just wanted him to join us if possible. And I appreciate you being here, Jeff, and share your experience with your team, and perhaps answer the questions that you see, or share other information if you'd prefer. So go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you, Julie. Julie's fantastic to work with and very, very insightful. We went down this road with Squadify in part because I felt that we were not performing as well as we could be as a team. We have 15 members on our Squadify team, and we've been working together throughout the year. One of the things that is extremely beneficial to us as a team is that the Squadify report provided us with a baseline. So we were able to see where we were at in relation to not only our own expectations, but in relation to high-performing teams in other, across other industries. And what I think probably the biggest benefit of it to date has been it provides a tangible, dynamic method to engage in growth conversations. It was interesting earlier in the presentation, it said that clarity was the number one issue that most leaders or teams needed to focus on. And so our last Squadify report, which I just got in the last couple of days, we actually tipped downwards a little bit, but I'm not concerned about that. I looked at that and thought, well, this isn't a discouraging moment. What it means is that as we peel the layers of this leadership team back in our work, we're uncovering more about how we function as a team, and we're discovering more questions that we need to work through. And clarity was one of the issues that was flagged for continued work, which will be a really interesting discussion at our next Squadify meeting, because we have a mission statement that we refer to frequently, and we have an Otter Portrait of a Graduate, which is essentially our vision for education in Fergus Falls Public Schools. And we've been talking about our roles and responsibilities to that vision. And so this will be, again, a really interesting launching point for our next meeting to talk about the gap between our mission, vision, roles and responsibilities, and where are we lacking in clarity. One of the things about the report that I find really, really helpful is it gives you a gap analysis. So it's showing you where you need to focus your attention. And I would caution people, you can't tackle it all at once. You're going to need to look at 2 or 3 main areas that you want to focus on for improvement. But the data is rich. It's extremely helpful in guiding dialogue and conversation for professional growth, personal growth, and team growth.
Jeff, if you don't mind, I'd like to tell a story about our first time together when we were processing your first Squadify. I promise it's not bad, but it ties to the one about resources that I called out earlier about a team who also struggled with having enough resources, and theirs was about time. In Jeff's team, that was one of their low areas after their first Squadify. And when we talked about that with their team, it ended up being about how resources were allocated and decisions made. And at the end of the day, it sifted down to a high school versus middle school, and how high school schedules tend to, the high school principal is creating schedules and you're using shared staff, and the high school principal would have a schedule done, and that you might say, I need Jeff Drake to teach Ed in the morning. So middle school, you get him in the afternoon. And the middle school would say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't work in my schedule. I needed him in the morning too. And so really it became more about what are the processes for determining staffing and for determining money. And it had created, without knowing that, a sense of jealousy somewhat, or entitlement maybe, that the high school is first, they're prioritized, they get everything and we get what's left. Again, if we had just looked at the words, not having enough resources, you wouldn't necessarily have known. And so Jeff put in place some decision-making processes, and they just talked about how decisions need to be made. You need to think district over, building first, that kind of thing. But really wonderful work and conversation as a result of that one thing. The other thing, I think I alluded to this earlier, and I will say this at the end, Squadify is a great tool to use with team leaders who want to grow, who really are. And so when each of us who are getting certified, we needed to identify a school district or an organization to work with. And Jeff is a leader that continues to focus on leadership skills. He is looking to grow. And so it was an easy team to work with. Not everyone has that mindset. And so Squadify might not be for everybody. You have to have a desire to know where you're at, and a desire to grow, which Jeff has been just outstanding to work with. So I appreciate that. And Jeff, thank you for being here today to share your Fergus Falls story. Teri?
Yeah, does anyone, Jeff, as long as you're still here, does anyone have any questions at all for Jeff? We've had great opportunities to work with districts across the state, within the metro, some large districts, outside of the metro, and some smaller districts, with cabinet teams, with even, there's a district that we work with that even extended. They started with their cabinet team and extended it to a larger admin team, and they didn't combine the teams. They're keeping those 2 teams separate right now, so they can take a look and analyze some of the data between those groups as well. Any questions at all? All right, then Lori, we can go ahead and go to that next slide. Jeff, thanks again so much for sharing.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. So as we look at this, we just wanted to leave you today with some wisdom and words of some other successful leaders across the way. Certainly hard in this amazing time in our women's basketball lives with Caitlin Clark to not show up, Pat, and share a quote from her, but really important to see these leaders who have recognized the importance of effective leadership teams to help with outstanding organizations. So we wish you well as you continue. We know spring is not always an easy time to lead, especially as budgets and budget decisions are continuing, and some of what comes with that, that's really difficult. And we hope that both some of the research and some of the information that we shared was helpful to you. And again, reminders. None of this is earth-shattering. None of this is new necessarily, but sometimes in the busy of the day, it's kind of fun to have some time just to sit back and remember and say, yeah, we've been working really, really hard as a team. And we maybe haven't spent as much time investing in ourselves and our team and what we need to do really well together so that we can serve all of our kids really well. So again, happy to stay and take questions, or happy to provide you 5 more minutes back in your lives, which I'm sure you can use. But thanks for spending time with us today, and thanks for knowing that you wanted to learn more about your leadership and how you help your leaders. Anything else, Julie?
It's been a pleasure. No,
Yeah.
appreciate their time.
We'll stay on a bit if anyone has any questions or wants to hang on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Teri and Julie. Thanks to everybody for being here.
Welcome.